So what is this? And how about this? Is this even a function? What are those greater than or equals doing in the middle of my JavaScript? We're going to be talking about all of this on today's episode of Browser Neighbor.
I know a lot of people get confused. In fact, I remember when I first started seeing these and I'm like, what the heck is that? I have a sample and everybody can get to this sample at the URL we'll show on the screen. But at the top, there's a couple of traditional functions. I could not figure out what you call a non-arrow function. It's either a regular function or a traditional function or just a function. They didn't go back and name the old type of function. But anyway,
they did not.
A couple of traditional ones. The first one is a named function. And the second one is an anonymous function that's been assigned to a variable. So kind of similar.
Yep. I use both.
You do.
And I do named functions more often, I think. Or anonymous functions, excuse me. Yeah.
You can actually combine them, by the way. You can put a name on your anonymous. Well, it's not anonymous anymore. But anyway, the advantages in the stack trace will show the names of the named functions. But anyway,
is a handy thing.
The arrow function, there's 4 different formats that I know of anyway. Yep. And you can see them here. So the first one is kind of the whole enchilada. You've got arguments and you've got a little body that you could put as many statements as you want. In this case, we're just returning the sum of these two. Let me just show the result tab.
Yep.
It's really simple, right?
Yep.
It's all about just showing the code. And then if all you want to do is a return statement, then you don't need the squigglies or the little braces or the return statement. You just put the output value.
Right.
And then if you only have one parameter, then you don't need the parentheses.
Right.
And then if you combine those, you get this very, very succinct little format, which is really useful in things like, if you're going through an array or doing a map, and you're just kind of creating a bunch of little transformations by passing in a function.
Yeah, I think that could be super helpful for that.
So that's the main thing. I mean, there's a couple of other little things about them. One is there's you can't have a name for your arrow function. It's always anonymous, and they don't support the arguments array, which is a little obscure. But if you have a random number of arguments or whatever, a variable number of arguments, you get this array inside of the function. You can't get those inside of arrow functions.
Right. We had that in .NET too.
Yeah.
When writing C#, you'd have the args from your host, your startup function, and you'd have the args, and you could do something with it. So we're kind of used to having that. I don't know that I've really ever used it in JavaScript. I mean, not that I
not too much.
Couldn't.
Doesn't come up
I just
too
don't
often.
have it. Yeah, right. I don't have need for it very often.
The other big difference is really about the this keyword, which is already confusing.
Yeah.
And so I guess I would invite people, as we go into the second sample here, I would invite people, if you'd like to see an entire episode dedicated to what is the meaning of this?
What
is the meaning of this?
Yes.
Drop us a comment, because I think it's something that confuses a lot of people. In any case, this is, somebody had the idea that it was smarter to have the definition of the this keyword inside of a function be determined by how you call the function. So it's the opposite of encapsulation. It's like if I had something that was encapsulated and I took a piece out and put it somewhere else just to randomize myself. At least that's the way I feel about it.
Yeah.
So here's an example. Here I'm going to add some HTML to the page, and that's just a little utility function. But I'm really going to create a mascot object, and so I'm going to pick on Parker the porcupine, and the PNP mascot. And in a regular function, this follows the normal binding rules. So get message, if I call it down here, mascot.getMessage, right? Get message 1. I end up with, here comes and it works. It pulls the name out of there.
Right.
Whereas in the arrow function, let's see what happens. I get back invalid name.
Right.
And the only reason I get back invalid name is because I set window.name to be
To
invalid
invalid
name.
name.
Because before I did that, I got a big fat JavaScript error,
Right.
undefined, right?
Right.
And so that's an example where it's really, kind of the traditional function sort of works better. It seems to.
In that example, yeah.
In that example. But then there's a counter example that I have, which is based on a callback. And arrow functions are really handy in callbacks. So here I have still window.name is invalid name. But now I'm going to delay showing the output. So set alarm is going to, in 1 second or however many milliseconds, it's going to display the name.
Right. You're saying, hey, I want to time out in this many seconds. And so when it times out, it'll run the function. So we are calling it from a different context than we were the last time.
Exactly. And that inner function is a traditional function.
Right.
And so what happens is that it doesn't work very well because I'll just fast forward to the, hey, invalid name, time to wake up. Why didn't it work? Well, because set timeout, the contents of this is determined by what object it was called on.
Yeah.
And since set timeout doesn't really know about the mascot object,
right,
it just sort of doesn't know what to do. So it gives you the global object or undefined, depending on your context and what your strict mode and stuff like that. Whereas in the second example, we have a nice arrow function.
Right.
And that one, as you saw before, works. And the reason that works is because this keyword is based on the outer function. So it's sort of being handled the same as a closure. In other words, things that were outside of a nested function are available inside the nested function.
Right.
And so it sort of is more like familiar to a C# developer. It just kind of seems to work because Parker, this.name, this was defined right here.
Right.
And
because you have a traditional function, because setAlarm2 is that traditional function, like in our last example. It had, in our last example, this keyword was from the object. And so now by using an arrow function in your set timeout, you're getting this context passed through into that arrow function. So this.name then means the same thing as it does for the traditional function.
That's right. It makes perfect sense, maybe.
Well, once you know what you're doing, yes, I think it does make perfect sense. But figuring it out, maybe not so easy.
Do you have any thoughts to add on all of this?
Well, I think one of the sort of great things about the arrow functions especially is when you're using certain frameworks. I'll use React as an example because it's one of the ones I do a lot. You end up having to, so for like HTML DOM events, you want to call a function from your event. And this matters in that case because, as you were explaining, the context of this depends on how you're calling the function. And if you're calling it from an event, then this is the DOM object and not the function that you're in or the class you're in or however you're calling that thing. And so by assigning a variable, and so we were sort of talking about this beginning, using the anonymous function, setting a variable name and then setting the variable name as the event target for your event means that you don't have to do the extra work of binding the function to the event. It just works right in the DOM. So that's a really handy use of arrow functions that I find. And you also brought up the map and those are good examples too, but I love the fact that I can use arrow functions to bind events in HTML. That's handy.
Really good perspectives. I agree completely. So I guess I would say if you like this video, please give us a like. Please subscribe to the channel. It'd be great to have you get notified because we're going to keep creating these, and there's a lot of other great things here on the Voitanos channel. And especially watch the classes video, which is coming up soon. where you'll learn how to use JavaScript classes, including
Arrow
function.
functions.
Great. Hey, see you
Thanks.
next time.